Hello everyone. Welcome to the session 5 of the 2024 APRU SWM Global ESG and Sustainability Lecture Series hosted by the APRU Sustainable Waste Management Program. Today's lecture will be delivered by Professor Jay Hyuk Rhee from the College of Business Administration at Korea University. Following the lecture, we will have a panel discussion and a Q&A session. I am Samhita Ankareddy, the moderator for today's session, and I am also a PhD student at Korea University. Before we begin the lecture, I would like to give a brief introduction to the APRU SWM program. The APRU Sustainable Waste Management Program is an integral part of the APRU membership and consistently works towards achieving the UN SDGs through thoughtfully designed events and programs aimed at raising awareness of sustainability, the UN SDGs, and the concept of ESG. The 2024 APRU SWM Global ESG and Sustainability Lecture Series commenced this April, and the first 4 sessions drew audience from various geographies with diverse expertise. We encourage you to look forward to today's session as well as the upcoming sessions, participate actively, and engage with us further. You can find more information on our website regarding speakers and registration. Moving to today's session, Professor Rhee will dive into the intricacies of corporate sustainability and environmental, social, and governance management. Following the lecture, he will engage in a discussion with panelists who are experts and practitioners of ESG and sustainability. Before we dive into the session, I would like to give you all a brief about our speaker. It is my honor to introduce our speaker for today's seminar, Professor Jay Hyuk Rhee. He is a distinguished professor at the College of Business Administration at Korea University and serves as the president of the International ESG Association and the Korea University ESG Research Institute. His research focuses on sustainability, corporate social responsibility, and global management strategies. He has published extensively in top academic journals and books on ESG topics, analyzed CSR practices in China, and developed the KESG guideline for evaluating the sustainability of Korean companies in collaboration with the Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy. His consulting, academic, and research expertise makes him a leading authority in the field. At the end of the seminar, we'll have a panel discussion and a Q&A session, and I request all of you to actively interact with Professor Rhee and our panelists. With this, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our speaker, our panelists, and our participants. Without further ado, Professor Rhee, the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you for the introduction, and good morning, everybody. My name is Jay Hyuk Rhee, and I'm a professor of the business school at Korea University. And it's my honor to have some opportunity to have some discussion regarding corporate sustainability and ESG management. Well, as the title of the presentation suggests, I will be explaining corporate sustainability from the perspective of ESG management, simply because I'm a professor at business school, so that might be a little bit different approach from what you have heard up this point. My presentation will focus on the following 4 main topics. Well, first, I'd like to focus on the implications and meaning of sustainability. Well, as a professor in the field of social science, whenever we teach some classes, we begin with some definition of the major terminology. So today I'm going to revisit the meaning of sustainability. And the second topic would be the major focus of today's presentation, which is ES-related topics, such as what is the ES management? And maybe a lot of you may have some interest in how you are going to forecast corporation sustainability using some rating methodologies. That's why I'm going to introduce some rating agency, and at the same time, I'm going to show some statistics regarding how corporations are sustainable. Well, one example would be Apple versus Samsung Electronics. But as a professor in the field of business school, I'm not very quite sure why Samsung Electronics and Apple are perceived to compete in the same industry. I guess they are not in the same business model, but anyway, in many cases, we try to compare Samsung Electronics and Apple. And I'd like to ask you, maybe you wanna keep wondering which corporation may be better in terms of ESG management. So that's what I'm going to share with you later. And second to last topic would be implications. If you try to find out some corporations that are really great in terms of ESG management, what kind of implications or lessons they should get some from today's discussion with you. And finally, I will close my presentation focusing on from company perspectives, what kind of approach might be more meaningful. So that would be four major topics that I'd like to have some discussion with you. Okay, starting with the first topic, we'll investigate the core concept of sustainability to clarify the precise meaning of corporate sustainability. So as you guess, I'd like to emphasize that the two terminologies are very different. Let's begin with the meaning of sustainability. Well, the term may look a little bit complex, but it can be easily understood as the ability to sustain. What comes to your mind when you think of sustainability? My guess would be the two pictures. On your right side, a polar bear standing on a small melting piece of ice in the middle of the ocean. On your left side, a large area of the deforested land in Amazon. Well, these images highlight the effects of climate change. So one thing we have to keep in mind that in many cases, when we say sustainability, we tend to focus on sustainability of the planet, for example. When you do so, we are referring to the ability to preserve Earth's natural resources and ecosystems for future generations. So in this case, you might have some interest in terms of how to combat climate change, protect biodiversity, and manage resources like water and energy responsibly. But how about the second example, sustainability of the ecosystem? If that's the case, we may focus on how to maintain the delicate balance of life within a particular environment. But at the same time, we may focus on the sustainability of the least developed countries or the poor countries. In this case, their main concern would be how to reduce poverty, how to improve education, healthcare, and so forth, right? So the first uh, lesson or first issue that I want to discuss with you to be when we say sustainability, we have to specify which subject we are referring to. As I mentioned earlier, today we focus on corporations. So now I'm adding one word, right? Not sustainability of the ecosystem, but sustainability of corporations. To do so, very first question I'd like to ask would be, what's the purpose of corporation? If you take some business classes in whatever university on this planet, on the very first class, professors may ask this question, what's the purpose of corporation? Well, the right answer would be, well, corporations, their main concern is how to make a profit. Marketing professors, they teach you how to make a profit by utilizing effective marketing strategy. Well, if you take some classes from the finance professors, he or she may mention that, well, corporations can make a profit by reducing, for example, cost of capital. If you're taking some whatever HRM classes, the professor may emphasize the role of leaderships in order to make a profit. So we mainly focus on how corporations are really sustainable, depending on how much profit they could make. So we may focus on how powerful those corporations are as of today. Let me give you two examples here. The first one is Walmart, 611 billion US dollars. That's Walmart revenue versus Sweden, around 600 billion US dollars. As you guess, Walmart revenue versus Sweden's GDP. Ironically now, Walmart is more powerful than one big country such as Sweden, at least in terms of the power they can have. So this may imply the immense economic power of large corporations. Then our question is, why do we care about corporation sustainability? Because as I said in my presentation file, because if these giant corporations face sustainability challenges, the adverse effects on stakeholders, especially their suppliers or the local communities, could be profound. So whether you like it or not, corporations, they should be sustainable. Otherwise, we may have some kind of negative effect. On the other hand, I guess you remember Occupy Wall Street. It was a protest movement that began in year 2011. It emerged as a response to growing frustration with corporate greed and the increasing economic inequality that was being felt across the United States. The movement slogan, I guess you still remember, we are the 99%, highlighted the vast difference in wealth and power between the top 1% of the population and the rest of the country. While Occupy Wall Street started as a local protest, it quickly gained momentum and inspired similar movements around the world, calling for greater social and economic justice. Well, as a professor in South Korea, shame to say this information, but South Korean corporations, they also face significant challenges due to widespread anti-business sentiment. So all these examples emphasize the need for transparency, ethical conduct, and fair practices to rebuild trust with the public. Now, for the second topic, we'll explore key issues related to ESG, including ESG measurement, rating methodology, and the result. Let me ask you the same question again. What's the purpose of cooperation? As previously mentioned, it is to make a profit. However, as I said earlier with the example of Occupy Wall Street, it is becoming increasingly important to ensure that procedural justice is upheld in the process of achieving financial performance. So, in a broader sense, performance can be divided into two categories. The first one is financial performance, such as revenue, profit, EBITDA, ROIC. And the other category would be non-financial performance. Simply say, whatever performance other than financial performance. This is very critical because now welcome to the definition of ESG. ESG, which stands for environmental, social, and governance. It helps corporations to evaluate and address sustainability-related risks and opportunities. So regardless of how much profit you make, a lot of stakeholders may be very curious about how they could make such a big profit. So second terminology would be ESG management. So I'd like to share with you regarding the formal definition. That is how to integrate not any practice, but sustainable practice into business operation. So when defining ESG management, we should focus on sustainable practices. The extent to which a company's practices are sustainable can be evaluated through ESG criteria. As you see from this first figure, ESG has three major components: environmental and social and governance. Under this subcategory, there are so many indicators, including climate change strategy or biodiversity, carbon intensity. How about social indicators? Equal opportunity, absolutely, and human right, consumer right, health and safety, and even child labor. How about the governance? Simply say compliance issue, right? And board independence, and even some compensation for CEOs. So using these several indicators, we are in a better position to evaluate, what to assess, what to predict how corporations are sustainable. So this is a little bit some conceptual framework, right? But now you may have some wondering, so what is the exactly methodology to measure one corporation's sustainability? Next question would be then, how are companies evaluated on their ES performance and ES management? You can see the logo on your right side. That is MSCI, Morgan Stanley Capital International. It is one of the most prominent evaluation agency, a global financial service company, right? As you see on your left side, MSCI monitors key ESG issues daily and update its assessment weekly with the latest information. It evaluates more than around 9,000 companies worldwide. And if my memory doesn't fail me, it also evaluates more than 100 Korean companies as well. On your left side, the system or steps looks so complicated. But if you see at the top of on your left side, it is ESG letter rating, which means by focusing on so many issues, the final letter grade would be 1/7, AAA, AA, A, triple B, double B, B, and triple C. For that purpose, on your right side, there are so many major issues on the far right side and the 10 themes and again, three pillars. So using these key issues, MSCI has some implications because they let us know how corporations are sustainable. So this is what MSCI does. But let me give you some very specific example. So you may have some concern or some kind of interest in certain corporations. So let me give you some real example here. Technology, hardware, and storage. That's the title of certain industry. For information, two corporations that I mentioned earlier, Apple and Samsung Electronics, are competing in this industry. Now, welcome to the reality. You know three pillars, right? Environmental, social, and governance. When we evaluate corporations competing in this industry, MSCI use different weighting system. On your left side, you can see the E pillar, right? Four major indicators: opportunities in clean tech, electronic waste, toxin emission and waste, and water stress. So on the E pillar, there are four sub-indicators. And if you combine all the four indicators weight, is about 22%. So reality is, when we rely on ESG, the weight varies depending on industry. In this case, E accounts for about 22%, social 42%, governance around 36%. So one implication you'd better keep in mind that is, well, it depends on which industry the corporations are competing. So even though two corporations, let's say Korean corporation, they are evaluated very differently depending on in which industry they are competing. So with this information in mind, let's take a look at Apple. As in the previous slide, when MSCI evaluates Apple's sustainability, they rely on these indicators and they give certain weight. And the final conclusion is the most recent data, Apple received a triple B rating. So the bottom on your left side, yes, Apple around average out of 140 corporations. And MSCI is very kind, right? Because MSCI gives a lot of information to Apple and Apple's stakeholders. For example, on your right side, ES leader. That means, according to MSCI's assessment, Apple is really great in terms of, for example, opportunities in clean tech. Average, corporate governance, not that bad, not that good. How about corporate behavior? It's not that great. So even though I'm going to have some discussion later, this is what you are supposed to keep in mind when you say effective ESG measurement. Simply say Apple Corporation. They focus on what they are doing in terms of ESG rating result. So if I were the CEO of the Apple Corporation, maybe I'll pay more attention to a corporate behavior or supply chain labor standard. This is Apple's rating. Whereas Samsung Electronics, Samsung has recently been upgraded to an AA rating. Up to last year, there was a A, but now it's a double A. Similar to Apple's case, MSI reveals what Samsung Electronics is supposed to do. Very similar, right? Let's focus on ES record, corporate behavior and supply chain labor standard for Apple, and exactly same for Samsung as well. What's the implication? In the industry where Samsung and Apple operate, corporate behavior and supply chain labor standard, they are very critical. Whereas water stress, opportunity clean tech, privacy and data security is not that bad, not that good because it's average. So this is very critical because the first lesson is when we evaluate corporate sustainability, we focus on the industry characteristics, and MSI gives different weight for ESG pillar. Let's take a look at the second example. Second industry would be semiconductor materials and equipment industry. Well, if you take a look at the environmental part, let's see, in the previous industry, E pillar accounts for about 22%, right? Now in this industry, E pillar accounts for about 19%, whereas S now accounts for 30%. In governance, more than 51%. So the weight for each pillar is not the same. Real example here, SK Hynix. It has recently maintained an A rating. For SK Hynix, the main concern would be the first one, opportunities in clean tech. Whereas SK Hynix is really great in terms of, for example, human capital development. How about Broadcom? It has constantly improved its performance and recently achieved an A rating. Very interesting example because SK Hynix opportunities in clean tech belong to ES record, whereas same opportunity in clean tech would be category as a leader for Broadcom Incorporation. So two corporations are not alike, even though they are competing in the same industry. It has a lot of implications, which means even though two corporations are competing in the same industry, their ES management cannot be the same because their business models are not the same. Their core competencies are not the same. So that is how we are going to evaluate and understand ES rating result. Okay, one more industry as an example, automobiles. Please remember the weight for E pillar in the previous two industries. Now, in this automobile industry, the E pillar has a weighting of about 30%, which is significantly higher than in the previous two mentioned industries. So if you belong to automobile industry, you have to focus on how you better deal with environmental pressures or environmental issues. Tesla continues to receive an A rating, partially because Tesla spent a lot of money in what? Opportunity in clean tech. Whereas, as of today, room for improvement, especially in product quality and safety, and at the same time, labor management. Well, Hyundai Motors South Korean corporation. It has seen its social rating decline from B to triple C. It's not that good news, right? And especially corporate governance and labor management, that's the room for improvement on the models. It's just a company, Kia Corporation. It currently holds a B rating. So if you compare these two Korean corporations in automobile industry, they are same in terms of nationality. They are same in terms of industry in which they are operating. What about they are different in terms of what? ESG rating result. So this implies that how you are going to conduct ESG management, and which would be our next issues, right? So based on the points I've explained up this point, now let's explore the key takeaways and implications for effective ESG management. I select 5 implications. The first point I want to emphasize is the importance of identifying the material issues within your specific industry as a critical step for the effective ESG management. If you belong to, let's say, soft drink industry like Coca-Cola, you may focus on what? Water stress, for example, carbon footprint, health and safety. Isn't that common sense? So while you are drinking Coke, you might be concerned about your health, right? So as a CEO of the Coca-Cola, he or she may focus on what kind of dilemma consumers may have when drinking a cup of Coca-Cola, right? So as I briefly mentioned in the previous cases, you'd better focus on industry characteristics or industry maturity to conduct ES management. ExxonMobil recently received a triple B rating. The conclusion is ExxonMobil should place particular emphasis on the E pillar within ESG, simply because it accounts for 41% of their overall evaluation. So this indicates that the significant importance of environmental factors in their industry. So without paying attention to E factors, it might be almost impossible for ExxonMobil to improve ESG rating result. How about second implication? The second point I want to emphasize is the importance of effectively integrating ESG outcomes into corporate management. Apple, for example, Apple reflects the ESG performance of its suppliers to manage its supply chain effectively and making adjustments whenever it is required. On your right side, there are tiny red part. There's a portion of Apple's suppliers who are not that great in terms of ES performance. Once Apple got this kind of information, what would be the next step? There are some numbers right here. As shown below, for example, 24 out of the total more than 1,000 suppliers were replaced based on their ES performance. Again, a lot of implications. To keep your status as a supplier to Apple, some corporations, for example, small and medium-sized enterprise, they should pay attention to their ES performance. Otherwise, they might be replaced by another suppliers that are much better in terms of their ESG rating result. The other point that I'd like to focus on would be the importance of the being cautious to avoid the ESG washing. The definition is over there, right? One interesting recent example, the product that highlight their ESG relevance saw a higher growth rate, reflecting a growing consumer preferences for sustainable product. The result is like this. Well, their performance, their growth rate is much better compared to other corporations. Then you might be curious about what is ESG relevance. These are the ESG relevance, such as cage-free, eco-friendly, fair wage, plastic-free. If the product emphasize these ESG relevance, consumers are more likely to choose that product. So what's the implication? Maybe companies may be tempted to engage in ESG washing. Well, due to this, many countries are drafting policies to guard against ESG washing. I have selected only 5 cases: EU, United States, Singapore, Japan, and South Korea. But in almost a lot of corporation, a lot of country, a lot of country, there are so many trends to draft policies. And second to last implication would be prepare for ESG disclosure. Well, the reality is a lot of corporations are actively preparing for ESG disclosure. ESG disclosure is you are going to let consumers, let local communities, or simply say, let stakeholders know what you are doing through their report. As you see from this graph, almost all the corporations are actively preparing for ESG disclosure. That's really great news because as a consumer, as a supplier, as a local community member, it's much easier for you to know what the corporations are doing as of today. But from companies' perspectives, that would be another dilemma. Why? GRI, ESRS, IFRS, SAC. While there is a general consensus on the importance of ESG disclosure standard, specific criteria have yet to be established globally. Well, the lack of concrete standard present significant challenges for companies, especially multinational corporations operating in many different countries. The requirements for each companies need to disclose and the specific contents that needs to be disclosed vary greatly. As a result, corporations will need to adopt a localized approach, preparing different disclosures for each country instead of pursuing a single global approach. So there would be some headache for especially larger corporations. If you go to European countries, if you go to United States, you have to make 2 different disclosure. Let me use the scope 3 disclosure as an example. As the picture indicates, there are 3 types of the greenhouse gas emissions: scope 1 and scope 2 and scope 3. Scope 3 is typically disclosed through 15 subcategories, as you see from the picture. Why do we care? Because for information, about 70% of the total greenhouse gas emission by global corporations are so-called scope 3. So without that information, we do not fully understand greenhouse gas emission by such corporations. So corporations are under great pressure to disclose not only scope 1 and 2, but scope 3. Well, what's the reaction? Samsung and Apple, no choice. So they report. But please pay attention to the red dot here, scope 3 and scope 3. It is evident that the two companies, Samsung and Apple, which compete in the same industry, disclose scope 3 emissions in very different ways. Which is right or wrong? We cannot say so because we have no consensus regarding what's the right way of disclosing scope 3 information. For information, even we have scope 4 this emission. It refers to avoided emissions. They represent the difference between the emissions that would have occurred without a company's product or services and the actual reduced emissions due to the use of the product or service. Especially scope 4 highlights the positive environmental impact that a company innovations or actions can have by preserving or reducing emissions elsewhere. However, same problems we may encounter, which is there is currently no universally accepted methodology for calculating and reporting scope 4 emissions. So the bottom line is, yes, it's great that companies rely on disclosure, but we do not know the full picture because two corporations are not alike in terms of their reporting system, not only scope 3, but at the same scope 4 in the future. Now, given the time constraint, the final point that I want to emphasize the need to incorporate ES performance into the CEO's KPIs. Business leverage ES management outcomes to assess their operations objectively and take active steps to enhance sustainability. To give you an example, 48% of energy companies offer financial reward to CEOs based on their success in reducing emissions. Well, now the final approach. Well, the key takeaway from today's presentation is that ES performance serves as a crucial additional metric for assessing a company's sustainability. Therefore, companies should adopt more strategic approach to ESG in order to enhance their competitive advantages in the so-called ESG era. Well, this concludes my presentation, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Rhee, for such a comprehensive talk and for giving us insights about corporate sustainability and ESG management. Before we move to the panel discussion session, we have a polite request for our attendees. We would like to capture a group photo with all of you at the end of the panel discussion session. Since we are conducting the session in Zoom webinar mode, it comes with its own set of advantages and disadvantages. To ensure that everyone's videos are visible, we will need to promote each attendee to the panelist role. We will assist in promoting you as panelists towards the end of the session for the group photo, and we kindly ask for your cooperation and understanding. Thank you very much. Now, let us proceed to the panel discussion session. Allow me to introduce our esteemed panel members for today's session. We have Professor Oyang, who is an Associate Professor and Dean of the Faculty of Business and Finance, University Tunku Abdul Rahman, UTAR, Malaysia. Professor Oyang has published over 40 articles in Scopus Index journals. Prior to joining academia, she held managerial positions at Fortune 500 multinational corporations and state agency. She is a recipient of the Japanese government MEXT MEX Scholarship and Taiwan Fellowship. We have Ms. Yura Cho, who holds a bachelor's degree in environmental and ecological engineering and Chinese language and literature from Korea University and is doing her doctoral studies. She has collaborated on multidisciplinary environmental science research with teams from China, the UK, Australia, Canada, Japan, and other countries. Currently, she is a visiting PhD student at Stanford University in Duo School of Sustainability, focusing on global water sustainability issues. Now, we will get started with the panel discussion. The panel discussion will go for about 10 minutes. We also request our attendees to post their questions freely to the chat box or raise their hands using the raise hand function on Zoom to ask a question to the panel or directly discuss with them. Yeah, Professor Lee, over to you.
Any questions or comments that you can have?
Okay, maybe I will kickstart the discussion. So I think with this growing the emphasis on this the ESG, so not only the large corporation, maybe the SME corporation also they are directly and indirectly involved. Okay, and mainly I think is for the especially for this the recent decade of this ESG investing that will lead the market and also the businesses toward this the ESG practices. And however, for mainly for this smaller company, okay, then they may need to look into more, for example, company involvement, meaning that to involve with their partners in the supply chain, including their customers, their suppliers, because those larger companies would have more requirement that the smaller company may learn. And also company need to have the resources. So it will be difficult maybe for the smaller company. And also the adaptation to this the regulation. Let's say just now, Professor Rhee, you have mentioned about the regulation of the listed the regulators, as well as maybe from shareholders. And I think most importantly is the culture, market culture of the younger generation, who is more concerned about environment, more concerned about the social issues, more concerned about the transparency issues. So those are the trends that all businesses should focus on. However, for those in the, especially those maybe in the smaller businesses or in the developing countries, they may have the lack of awareness of these trends, because if they do not deal with international cooperation, they may have this lack of awareness. And also the current working condition, because depends on country, the legal requirement may be very, very low that that do not require businesses to upgrade. But if they need to work, let's say to export more overseas, they need to work with the world class of corporation. Then they need to improve on their working condition of the labor condition. Okay, and for the companies, I think one of the major issue, okay, just also just on discuss is limited data. Okay, because a data also it is a here and there, but unless the what is practicing now is, for example, larger combination, the corporation, they may have a chief sustainable officer that they lead the team to do this to drive the change as well as to collect the data. But maybe for the other small companies, they may have these challenges. They may not have these such resources. And also the validity as well, because whether there is a sufficient, even though, for example, if a company, they work with a larger company, the world-class company, they look for data, sometimes there is no validity or no documentation support, okay, unless the company send the audit team, as well as And with this digital revolution era, they need also the use of the technology such as the big data. That will be easier and more accurate in collecting the data. And as well as for this security issue is data quality, security, and privacy. Because on one hand, we want transparency, but on the other hand, we will be introducing the private privacy of the consumers. Therefore, these are some area that the companies may be facing for reporting challenges. So there's my comment. And also, I think very importantly, Professor Rhee have highlighted is about the scope 3. Okay, so beside the very general requirement of the Bursa list of the stock market listing requirement of the scope 1 and scope 2, and scope 3 now is coming more important, especially the ISO requirement of the scope 3 is under making, and it will be coming up soon, maybe in the 1 or 2 years time, and that will also can help, okay, all companies regardless of sizes to have a standard on how to practice as well how to measure, okay, the ESG. And in this scope 3 also importantly is the integration of the supply chain, okay, integration with the upstream as well as downstream, meaning that in terms of, for example, sustainable logistics, in terms of the use of reusable packaging, the consideration of change of the transport mode from the air to sea or from the truck to the train, as well as those highly related to scope 3 activities industry could be like cement manufacturing, paper and pulp manufacturing, and metals and mining industry. Those are the areas that may be very important in the considering these are scope 3 effects. Okay, so that's my comment for the time being. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the excellent comments, and within certain time, you cover almost every single issue that is very critical. So I don't want to repeat what you just explained, but one of the two issues, small and medium-sized enterprise issues. That's right. As you precisely mentioned, when you say small and medium-sized enterprise compared to large corporation, that means some corporations are small in terms of what? In terms of resources, human resources and capital resources and natural resources. So even though we are talking about ES management or ES error, small and medium-sized enterprise cannot catch up, not because they don't like the concept, but because they don't have enough resources. So as you pinpoint, it's very critical for them to comply with the ESG requirements, but unfortunately, they don't have enough resources. So in South Korea, the government tries to support small and medium-sized enterprise by giving some consulting, or by giving some classes regarding the lectures or whatever things. But yes, in the long run, that would be another big hurdle we can work together. But as I briefly mentioned in my presentation, small and medium-sized enterprise, when they do not pay enough attention to the importance of ESG management, they might be replaced by somebody else. So that would be some tragedy. But let's be some positive issue, like such as some half empty or half full syndrome. If small and medium-sized enterprise are really great in terms of their ES performance, they can join in such a big supply chain management by, let's say, APRU or Samsung Electronics. So depending on how eagerly you are going to engage in this kind of game, there could be competitive advantage or competitive disadvantages. You also mentioned about some younger generations. Yes, that's right. Younger generations, as one important stakeholders, they pay more attention to not only the product itself, but the nature of the corporation that produced the product. You want to pick up some product because you like it, the quality, but sometimes you do not want to pick up the product simply because you don't like the corporation that has made the product. So younger generations like you are very critical because as a consumer, as a job seekers, and as a next generations or leaders, your voice are very strong, and corporations are very sensitive about what you are thinking, how you are behaving. So I want to emphasize again the MZ generations, your bargaining powers are really huge. So never underestimate it. And scope 3 issues and legal issues. And so for the remaining excellent comments, for your comments, I want to say like this one. Again, corporations, two corporations are not alike. Well, they are competing in different industry. So their requirements are different. Let's say they are competing in the same industry, but unfortunately, one corporation exporting to United States, the other to European countries, then again, their stakeholders, their requirements are different. Well, two corporations, they are competing in the same industry, they are exporting same product to the same country, but unfortunately, who knows? Their consumers are not alike. In this case, they are very different in terms of their management styles. So in some ways, effective ESG management is not that difficult because once you figure out your current status, then it's much easier that you know what you are supposed to. So you better recall what I show you with the graph. ESG result. Apple, Samsung Electronics, was Hyundai Motors, SK Hynix. They know their current status, and now they are going to move forward by reducing whatever risk coming from their limitations and by leveraging opportunities. So this is some kind of, again, general comment that two corporations are not alike. So you better pay attention to who you are and what's the current status. So that's my little bit additional comment on your excellent comment. And thank you again. Well, I'm not sure how many more minutes we have, but any other comments or questions, please?
Oh, can I have a short question if time allows? Thank you for your presentation. I just want to ask one question about the evaluation of the sustainability. So as far as I see and I know, I feel like there are more qualitative evaluation are made by many of rating agencies and even many standards which is shared globally for the ESG disclosure. But in the approach of like science, if we make a scientific approach on this sustainability, I think the quantitative evaluation is definitely needed since this itself makes a transition of like story from the fact that or like science-based values or the actual number gives the actual fact as evidence of the sustainability performances. But maybe I assume that's just because I am in the field of environmental science or engineering. So while I'm approaching the sustainability and ESG performances, I am just always curious about what would be the exact calculation or the exact methodology they were made. But my question is that how is it important to make a quantitative evaluation in the field of business? And I wonder like I wonder does even researchers in business area also have some needs on this more exact and quantitative evaluation for analyzing the sustainability.
Well, again, thank you for the excellent question and comment. And that's a really good question because I don't have the best answer to that question. But well, what pops up in my mind is how you are going to evaluate using which information, quantitative versus qualitative. Well, let me say this first. One of the founders, one of the well-known scholars in the field of the business, uh, Peter Drucker. Well, he once mentioned that if you cannot measure, you cannot manage or you cannot improve it.
Mm.
Well, there are a lot of controversies over that comment because maybe Dr. Joe, maybe if I ask you, are you happy now in the United States? Then your answer is, well, I'm happy. Then I'll ask you, how can you prove that you are happy? Then you might be puzzled. Well, I'm happy, but how can I explain that to Professor Ray? Maybe very hard. But we know that if you fall in love with somebody else, how happy you are. Well, I'm very happy, but let's say out of the 7 Likert scales, maybe 6.8, 6.9, that's ridiculous. But in the business school, we rely on some numbers, partially because, how can I say nicely, numbers are not that subjective. I wouldn't say numbers are objective. I would say numbers are not that subjective, especially when you say numbers, when you say numbers from the sustainable report. Well, that information, if I mentioned earlier, as I mentioned earlier, there might be some ESG washing issue, but at least some report released by big corporation will be confirmed by CEOs. So those numbers might be more objective than subjective. Without that information, without that kind of confidence, it's very hard for us to evaluate a corporate sustainability, especially it's almost impossible that you compare two corporations unless you have some very clear numbers. Again, I don't like numbers, but numbers are at least one of the first steps through which you can see the true picture of one corporation. So that is another reason that we need some collaborations between scholars from different disciplines. Some scholars who rely on some numbers, some scholars rely on other than numbers. Similar to what I mentioned in my presentation, performance, right? Financial versus non-financial performance. That's exactly what. Numbers versus some performance that cannot be expressed using numbers only, right? But as of today, what I can say to your excellent question is, numbers might be the at least the first step. You can tackle some big issue, but absolutely we need some additional input, other index through which we can replace the numbers meanings. But as far as I know, quality versus quantity, it has its pros and cons. But when you try to compare two corporations, or if you try to focus on one corporation across different years and different systems, then you'd better familiar with certain numbers first.
Yeah.
And my advice is start with some numbers and then add up additional values from some interviews or from some discussions or some comments from their press release and so forth, right? So please do not say A is better than B, but the better approach is, which might be, I'm not sure this is the right terminology, but more effective in terms of achieving your current goal. So I think that's my not so great answer to your great questions.
Yeah, thank you for your answer. So as I understood, so you mean there should be an integral evaluation, including both the quantitative and qualitative evaluation results, right? So that would be the ideal uh, result of sustainability evaluation.
Yes. As we said, we have to focus on not only financial performance, but non-financial performance at the same time, right? So maybe the same issues here. Thank you
Thank
again.
you very much.
Professor Rhee, we are running out of time. Maybe we can take 1 to 2 questions from the Q&A box and then close the session in 5 minutes. Do you want me to read out the questions for you, or how do you
Yes, there
prefer?
are about 5 questions. So let me first, well, given the need for a more universal standard ESG rating, which international organization can lead this? Would the UN have enforcing capabilities? How can you address the volunteer nature of ESG reporting? Well, let me tackle the second issue first. How can we address the volunteer nature of ESG reporting? That sounds great. But as I mentioned in my presentation, voluntary, similar to what the Dr. Joe just asked, voluntary means your reporting is not standardized, right? Using your own methodology. So again, it might be difficult to compare across different reporting systems. So I'm not sure what you mean, volunteer nature of ES reporting, but some risk of so-called ES washing. But it is inevitable because we have not yet have any kind of consensus regarding global standard of ES reporting. So first question is, which international organization can lead this? Well, my wild guess is there are two major players. One is US, SEC, and European issues. But I do not know exactly which organizations can lead this one. But we better ask this question to corporations and their stakeholders. We better ask them which standard might be better for us to better evaluate corporations' sustainability. Because for information, different standards are very different in terms of their scope, in terms of the requirements, in terms of their operations methodologies. So they are very different. So in some sense, my answer is it should be up to us, stakeholders, regarding what would be better ES rating in terms of uh, so-called systems. MSI would be one of them, and GRI would be one of the reporting mechanisms. Well, the reality is their business models based on uh, confidentiality. They do not reveal all the information, partially because they say it's our business model, that is our intellectual property, whatever, whatever. So another question would be, in the long run, can you have standard ES rating? My answer is absolutely no. If we have a standard ES rating on this planet, what happens next? Only one rating agency will survive. Well, I don't think that would be happening because all the rating agencies, they love to make profits. They love to exist as a rating agency in the future. If they reveal all the information to each other and they got some consensus which information is better than the other, and if they say, now this is 100 indicators and we are going to stick to only this 100 indicators, well, then in this case, on this planet, we don't need any rating agency at all because all the informations are known to all the stakeholders. I might be wrong, but my wild guess is that will never happen, partially because that's the business model of rating agencies. For information on this planet, they say more than several thousands of the rating agencies. Why? Because their rating mechanisms are different. and their rating results are different. Given the time constraint, today I never discussed the discrepancy across rating agencies in terms of result. Well, I didn't include it because, well, there is again one kind of so not so happy reality. So that would be one of my major comments about that issue. Okay, so rating standard, large corporations, upstream, that's what I mentioned earlier. So, okay. So I believe how about standard? Well, a lot of you discuss about standard, right? And okay, how about the initiatives? Well, how do sustainability initiatives motivate companies to not just disclose their environmental impact, but also develop some strategies to minimize their impacts and so forth, right? Well, again, that's very critical because now, let me show this one. There are so many initiatives, such as some initiatives try to reduce waste, some initiatives to conserve natural resources, some initiatives to ensure fair labor practices, some initiatives to reduce carbon emissions. So companies that participate in these initiatives can better manage the risk inherent in specific industries because those risks are common across the industry. So by joining those by joining these initiatives, companies can quickly identify in the specific risk and collaborate on common responses. At the same time, they can identify strategies to turn risk into opportunities by leveraging from the so-called best practices. So as a group member of some initiatives, they can learn from their peers in terms of how they deal with risk, how they turn the risk into opportunities. So in many cases, that's why some initiatives help corporations to reduce risk and at the same time to explore some opportunities inherent in those industries. So there are tons of different initiatives, and if you have some interest in certain industries, you may figure out in those industries what would be the typical initiatives, and you can see the risks and opportunities common in those industries. So I believe that there would be one of the not that bad ways for corporations to identify risk and better deal with new tasks in the future. Okay, I think that is almost it. And
Thank you very much,
go ahead.
Professor Rhee and our panelists. Yes, Professor, you were saying something?
No, go ahead.
Now we request your understanding for capturing a group photo. Our team will assist you in promoting as panelists. Please bear with us for a minute and we'll close this in a few minutes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much and see you later then.
Professor, just a second. We're going to have a group photo and then
really?
we'll have closing remarks. Yeah.
Okay.
2 more minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we are almost set and have promoted everybody as a panelist. Yeah. Let's take a picture now. Everybody smile. Once more. Smile. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. We have now reached the end of the session, and before concluding the webinar, I thank Professor Rhee, our speaker for today's session, and our panelists for their valuable insights and for engaging the audience to an enlightening discussion. I thank all our attendees for their active participation and asking the questions. We extend our special thanks to the APRU and the APRU Sustainable Waste Management Program, led by Professor Yongshi Kok of Korea University, for organizing these events and creating a learning and networking platform for students, researchers, and everybody interested. We request you to look forward to our next session on September 12th on climate action planning and circular waste management for an island economy by Professor Makina Kaufman of University of Hawaii at Manoa. Thank you once again, everyone. We hope you all have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.